Church, a place where believers of all ethnicity, background, and race can come together to worship their Father. Church, a place that is void of any fear of being criticized, left out, or judged. Church, a place where all problems of the world are set aside and the focus is on God. Right? Wrong. Problems are rampant in the church. That is a fact. The church can never be perfect due to the fact that it is made of imperfect people. All through the church, you can see unfaithfulness. There is a lack of love and no acknowledgement of God. People come to church to receive something, not give something. They come to hear and not listen and apply. People in the church might also judge someone without seeing their own problems. All of these things, though, come back to the idea that there is a dire need for faithful Christians in the church. We have lost our central focus of faith and love. Now, I know that we all struggle with remaining faithful to God. See, a lack of faithfulness has caused problems for generations, not just in the church, but outside the church as well. Think, for example, of civil rights. During our time at Caruso, we visited the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, a place of compelling stories and a place of deep grief for a group of people that have been oppressed and judged for centuries. And what was the cause of that oppression? A lack of faithfulness in a group of people. No, not African Americans, white Americans. White Americans during the Civil Rights Movement lacked a faith in God and did not stay true to God, causing them to feel the need to oppress and shove aside a whole race of people. Mississippi, my home state, was not fully legally integrated until the year 1970. Let's put this into perspective. That was only 51 years ago. And I would take a guess that even some of you lived through that time. Point is, a lack of faithfulness in God causes problems. And when we lack faithfulness, we disobey God and we sin. God must be the center of our lives. If He is not, then we will find ourselves in the same position as the Israelites in the book of Hosea. Turn with me to Hosea 4:1-4. Hosea 4:1-4. Now, in the book of Hosea, the Israelites have turned away from God. They are on a physical high with prosperity and wealth. They are on a spiritual low in their faithfulness to God. And God realizes that He must send Hosea to be an example for the people. So He tells Hosea to go, take a prostitute as your wife. When Hosea does this, his wife ends up having children, not his own. And God uses this as a powerful example to show the Israelites that though they have been unfaithful to Him, He has remained faithful. Hosea 4:1-4, the word of the Lord. Hear the word of the Lord, you Israelites, because the Lord has a charge to bring against you who live in the land. There is no faithfulness, no love, no acknowledgement of God in the land. There is only cursing, lying, and murder, stealing, and adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. Because of this, the land dries up, and all who live in it waste away. The beasts of the field, the birds in the sky, and the fish in the sea are swept away. But let no one bring a charge, let no one accuse another, for your people are like those who bring charges against a priest. God obviously has a problem with Israel. The Israelites have been a faithless nation and have strayed away from His steadfast love, and towards the end of verse 1, it mentions that the Israelites have no knowledge of God. Now let me make this clear. The Israelites knew of God, but they lacked an intimate relationship with the Father. Their hearts were not in it. Just like in many churches today, people know of their Father, but there's no relationship with the Father. That causes problems. Look with me in verse 2 where it describes the types of problems the Israelites are having with their sin. There is only cursing, lying, and murder, stealing, and adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. What does it say the Israelites are struggling with? Well, it mentions swearing, lying, murder, stealing, and adultery. Now that sounds familiar. Where are these things mentioned elsewhere in the Old Testament? Well, they're mentioned in the Ten Commandments. The Israelites were breaking the laws given to them by God. There was a lack of faithfulness in the Israelites' hearts, and due to that lack of faith and ignorance they showed towards God, they sinned. But look with me in verse 3. It says, "Because of this, the land dries up, and all who live in it waste away. The beasts of the field, the birds in the sky, and the fish in the sea are swept away." The Israelites' unfaithfulness towards God does not only affect them, but it affects the whole world. Human sin has cosmic consequences. In the text, it mentions that the birds, the beast, and the fish all suffer, along with the whole land. Human sin causes the whole world to suffer, and because of that, the whole world longs to be redeemed. Now flip over to Hosea 14. This is where we find the answer to a nation in dire need of faithfulness to God. This is where we find redemption for the whole world. In the first verse of chapter 14, we see the answer, plain as day. Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God. Return. We must return. However, what does that look like? Well, the answer to that is in the next verse. We must say to God, God, take away my iniquity. We must confess our sinful nature, and we must have faith that God can take it away. And when we confess our sin, and we confess that we need His presence in our lives, we will be healed. Look at verse 4. It mentions, it says, "I will heal their waywardness and love them freely, for my anger has turned away from them." The answer is simple. When we put our faith back in God, our sin is made clean. It is healed, and we receive the love of God. And when we receive the love of God, it makes it easier to show that love to others, and they can see God through us. 1 John 4:19 says that we love because He first loved us. Because of God's love, we can then love others. That is the answer. If we love God, and because of His love for us, we no longer need to pass judgment on our brothers and sisters in the church. When love and faithfulness in God is at the center of our lives, we can accept people for who they are and love them with a love that surpasses all love. So think about the civil rights movement. Had love been the center of people's hearts, Rosa Parks wouldn't have been imprisoned for sitting at the front of the bus. If love had been in the center of their hearts, James Meredith would not have been shot on his march to Memphis from Jackson, Mississippi, just a mile south on Highway 51 from my hometown of Hernando, Mississippi. Had love been in their hearts, Martin Luther King would not have had to say, "We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream." If love had been in their hearts, MLK would have never been shot at the Lorraine Motel on April 4th, 1968. Now listen to this. If love had been in our hearts, we would not judge others for the way they sing in church or the way they present their worship to God. If love was in our hearts, we would no longer see people, or we would no longer judge the black family that walks into our predominantly white church. If love was in our hearts, we would no longer see people for the color of their skin, but for the content of their hearts. I challenge you today to find love in your heart. When you find that love in your heart, then you will be able to show the glory of God to others. And it all starts with love. I challenge you to love God, just as the answer in Hosea says, and I challenge you to show that love to someone else. No longer can the church be a place for hypocrites and unfaithful believers. We must be the light to other people, just as Jesus says in Matthew 5:16. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. We must show the love of God to the rest of the world. We must, in the context of Hosea 4:2, have faithfulness, steadfast love, and a knowledge of God. And when we do that, others will see the glory of God. And one day, in the words of MLK, the glory of the Lord will be seen together.